So, why do stories move us in ways that facts often can't? Jesus taught through parables because stories bypass the intellect and speak directly to the soul. Rick has followed that same path, transforming the cosmology of the Urantia Book into compelling novels that allow readers to experience the Fifth Epochal Revelation through human lives, relationships, and adventure. So tell us, Rick, and I'm a big fan of stories, and in your work in particular, we're going to talk about it in a minute. But I always believe that myth and stories are the bridge to where we communicate. I mean, in the dawn of time of civilization, you have the campfires, and you have people telling stories, and that's how myth and all these legends got passed down. And I also believe that these are very basic foundations for, especially for you know children before they come of age, before they hit the 13, 14, and start to find themselves. That these stories of heroes sets their values, their ideals, their longings, the understanding of good versus evil, what it is to be a hero. So it's really interesting to bring this to life, and so talk to us a little bit of why you started, or what you found in the Urantia Book in writing these novels, and what's your opinion and what's your take on using, like we were saying, this tool, like Jesus did in parables, and to bring this information in this way.
hmm Yeah, the Urantia book has the incredible history of the planet, and there's so many stories in that history, beginning with the planetary prince, the rebellion, Adam and Eve, Melchizedek, and now the Jesus, and now the fifth epochal revelation. I just long for the world to find this book and read it. But Santiago, maybe 1% of the people on the planet will ever read a 2,000-page book.
Yeah, yeah,
So
right.
I thought, why not get the stories out and put them in novel form? So in 2016, I started writing a book about two people who died and went to heaven, as it's described in the Urantia book. And I came up with this book.
Okay, perfect.
It,
The
is it
Resurrection
Doctrine?
Hall.
Yeah, Resurrection Hall. And these two people, um, they land and get their brand new bodies. They go on vacation for 10 days, and they explore Mansion World #1, and they ride on the big birds that are up there. They take classes, they meet people from other planets, and then they move on to Mansion World #2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7.
Hmm.
And it's about a 250-page book. Um, just a standard novel size, a 2 or 3 day read, and that was my first one.
So in just to go a little bit deeper, I really like what you said, and a lot of what people's have, or we have the traditional concept of what hell is. I mean, hell and heaven. This polarity of where you're going and what's happening in the afterlife. And here, what's interesting is you're giving another picture of somewhere that's not just going and playing a harp and being on a cloud. It's
Mhm.
I mean, you're talking about vacation. So
Yeah.
these dynamics, and that's something that we do not realize. We're constructing a material world where we have these different roles and different times, and it's the same thing when we progress in our ascent to heaven, and these mansion worlds that you talk about, where you have different times of the day, different times of activities. And it's really interesting, that it's not there's more to the afterlife. That's the point,
Yeah.
than we can see or we can understand in the traditional sense, right?
Yeah, my characters in the book Resurrection Hall, they get an assignment. They're going to become teachers of a
Okay.
of a new set of people who are coming to Mansion World number one from Urantia.
Okay.
There's gonna be a dispensational resurrection soon, and they're gonna have to greet these people and teach them about most of them are not going to know anything about the Urantia book, and they're not going to know anything about how the universe is set up or anything that we learned in here on Urantia from the Urantia book.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
and that's interesting. So it's not that you just die and suddenly everything is resolved and you're perfect. You still have an ascension career where you still are learning, you're still evolving, and it's really for in my opinion, it's really rewarding to see that you know, life continues. It's just in a different matter, and it's in a different state, and that even the relationships that which is really important to a lot of people. Of course, it is to me as well. That they keep on going. You know that you're talking about two people that resurrect together. So I mean, there is continuum in these relationships throughout time, right?
yeah, yeah. And everybody wants to know about the next life. What it's going to be like when you die.
Yeah.
And they need that assurance, and that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. Um, it just so I've written 8 books now, and
Okay.
I took the stories of Adam and Eve, I took the stories of Melchizedek, and I don't in my books. I don't drift far from what it says in the Urantia book. I try to
Okay.
just like, for instance, Adam had to leave the first garden, and
Mm-hmm.
they tell us this. But they don't tell us what he said when he had to go to the people who were living in the garden, and explain to them why they had to leave, and why they needed to go to this other place, and what it was going to take, and
Which
how
is the
how
the
to
the
get
famous
dressed.
banishment, and this is just to put a little bit into context to people that do not know the Urantia book. This is we're talking about the banishment of Adam and Eve from paradise
Yeah,
to what we know from the Bible, right?
yeah. They had
Okay.
made a mistake, and they were going to have to leave the first garden and go to a second garden, and so they don't tell us what Adam said, but I imagined, I expanded on him meeting with his people and talking to them and answering questions. And that's what most of my books are about. Just expanding on the details.
Yeah,
A lot of times they just give you a few details, but it implies so much that you
exactly.
can
What you
use
read
your
between
imagination. Yeah,
Yeah, what you read between the lines is very important, and I'm glad that you have that creative mind and that creative drive because you know through creativity we can bring we kind of you know that's why you do with a character when you build it you try to analyze its psychology you know and this in this work and studying
yeah,
these characters you know bringing that psychology what would have happened so this is very interesting and I like that contribution
yeah,
because it is very interesting, and one of the, I mean, now that you mentioned Adam and Eve, and it's one of the things that you know, in this in the first segment we were talking about, you know, how many of the things that weren't really resolved by traditional Catholicism to me were answered by the Urantia book, and this is one of them. You know, how do we reconcile? Because I knew that we came from you know, from apes, from the primates. You know, that was definite to me. But at the same time, how could I reconcile the story? I mean, there's a lot of things to reconcile. There's a, you know, with a original sin and all that. But how was that? You know, how could I reconcile that? And this is the interesting thing about the Urantia book that both things happen. You know, there was an evolutionary part of our material existence that started, and throughout many millions of years, you know, from organic matter came into being and then it got to a point where we now started another sequence you know a spiritual sequence you know and that being who we are and that's really fascinating to me you know and how Adam and Eve came to uplift that you know biological not biological but you know cosmic you know cosmic biology that we have you know and that really you know, makes it even more more real to me. You know, understanding that these two natures, both the material as well as the spiritual, and can really coexist, right?
yeah. And I just long for the people of the world to know the truth about Adam and Eve, and all the other history that we have. It's so revealing, and I believe it would correct our path if people really realize what was going on in our planet. And the Urantia book explains that so well. We're
Yeah.
not cosmic orphans. We're here as children of God, and we have so much help and so much ahead of us that it's so beautiful if everybody could know what's
Yeah.
really going on. The world is lost. It doesn't know much
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
It
It's
just
lost and confused. That's the
yeah.
problem, you
The
know.
mythology is so strange, and yeah.
So, I mean, now talking a little bit more about your work, and we talked a little bit about too your book. So, and the other books, and and beyond them, what are the stories? What particular, let's say, couple of characters or stories within the book do you think are do really touched you or really changed the way that you viewed, and think about that on what is it really that what characters and what stories really drove that change.
Where to start?
I know.
Van and Amadon have to be the greatest
Okay.
heroes.
Can
They
you
s-
tell us a little bit about them?
well, Van was stayed loyal when our planetary prince went into rebellion. He was on the staff of the planetary prince. There were
Correct.
100 of them, and about half of them went into rebellion with the prince, but not Van.
With Lucifer and all that story that people hear about, the war in heaven, and good versus evil. This is the war, and these are part of the army that, like we hear, the fallen angels and those that stay true. This is what we're talking about, correct?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
So interesting.
I wrote a book about the rebellion, and that's one of the most interesting parts of the Urantia book. It kind of clears up all that mystery about who was Lucifer and what about these fallen angels and what does all that mean, and they really clear that all up for us. But
Yeah, and Ben and Amazon, as you were saying, tell us a little bit, because I think they're very good heroes, and I feel that there's a lot of mythology that from different parts of the world that come from that story. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
mhm. Yeah, yeah. uh, all over the world, there are different mythology that's based in our distorted and misunderstood past.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But another character that I really impressed me was David Zebedee.
Okay, yes, I
Um,
like this person too.
yeah, yeah, he was a real worker and get it done, and he didn't have to be told what to do. The world needs to know about him. They know about John and his brother James
Yeah,
Zebedee,
yeah,
the
the
sons
the
of
apostles.
thunder.
Yeah.
Yeah, the apostles. Well, David Zebedee was their brother, and he ran a message service. And he was a lot smarter than most of the apostles. He knew what was going on, and he believed in Jesus, and he never questioned, and he was just a stalwart helper all the way.
And definitely, I think a role, and I think that's why he wasn't an apostle, because he needed to be in that role. And let me explain a little bit to and give context to our audience. We know from the account in the Urantia book that Jesus, throughout his ministry, had this messenger service that was headed by David Sevedi, and they would communicate, and that's why everything was known, very fast throughout different parts of the that time Judea and Palestine, in that area, because they had this messenger service that they would communicate. So and it's also very interesting because in the account when Jesus is resurrected, since he was a true believer, he was the one, one of the few that did not doubt that he was going to resurrect. He
Yeah.
was the first that got those messengers out, and by I think that evening, it was communicated throughout the world that Jesus had risen. So that's where everything comes from, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Love that story as well.
Yeah. But of course, the greatest person is Jesus. Um, the Urantia book has 700 pages of his story, where the Bible has only just a small number of pages that were actually about him. But
It's
um,
if you add it, and we've done this. If you add the entire four gospels, it's around a year, a month's worth of stories. You know, a life story.
yeah,
Comparing it to the 700 plus pages that you're talking about, right? And
yeah,
just a quick disclaimer: it does not deny or contradict. It just states a lot of the facts that were even ambiguous at the time, you know, and that were really left to interpretation when once you look at it in the
yeah,
Bible. This really sets the record straight. So it's not, you
yeah.
know, against, nor we always
That's right.
believe in this. You know, it's layering on top. So it's
Yes,
revelations.
expansion.
It's
Yes,
an expansion, exactly. It's like like that shirt that you have there. You have the three concentric circles. Everything of truth is in the middle, and it's just
yeah,
an expansion of that truth. So just believe
yeah,
in that, you know, expansion of what we're saying by somebody that was there and with a different account. You
yeah,
know, and just in this version, the account is that it was a human. So
yeah.
please tell us a little bit more about this, Rick.
Well, um, I didn't really believe Jesus was. I didn't know what to think of Jesus before I found the Urantia book. I was in
Correct.
Vietnam, and I got sick. My fingers were swelling, and I went to the medic, and I said, "What do I need to do?" And he said, "Well, stay back in the rear for a few days and eat some good chow. You're probably just malnourished." And so I did, and I found a bunker that wasn't occupied, and in it was this book called the Good News Bible, and it was the
Okay.
New Testament in modern language.
Okay.
And that was my real introduction to Jesus. But when I finished, I thought, well, he was just maybe a wise man. And
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot of stories that they added all those miracles. People tend
Yeah.
to write fantasies about their heroes, and I just thought it was kind of a cool story. But
Yeah,
then when I
no,
found,
nothing much more than any other great philosopher, religious man,
yes,
guru. Yeah,
exactly.
I understand. Yeah, yeah, and that's
Yeah,
just let me make this side note. That's where I put Jesus after I left Catholicism. I really said, okay, I mean, he's an ascended master. He's a wise guy, you know, a wise
yeah,
person, but
yeah,
not in the context and the dimension that the Urantia book
yeah.
tells us. So please continue.
Yeah, the Urantia book expands on who Jesus was. I mean, the world would be astounded to know that he was just the incarnation of a celestial being named Michael, who
Yeah,
happens to be the creator of 10 million inhabited planets, and of which we are one. And Urantia had the good fortune to be the place where he enacted his seventh bestowal as Jesus. Apparently, these Michaels, there are a lot of Michael's sons like him, but they have to incarnate as their creatures so that they will have a sympathetic understanding of their
yeah.
creatures.
Which
And
is something
Jesus,
I love. That is something I love. The bestowals, the concept of the bestowals, that you become the creature that you create. So in the way you
yeah,
understand him, you have like you said, that sympathy. That I mean, you can even judge them, although they don't. But you know, you can judge the experience. You know, and that's really
yeah.
magical. You know, comparing it to some of the accounts of why Jesus came, and you know, to be a blood sacrifice when he really came here. Number, I mean, among many other things, but really to attain this incarnation, as you said, in the human flesh.
The world would be so enlightened if they knew the full story of Jesus's life.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
definitely.
and it will one day.
Definitely. So,
Yeah.
and thanks for bringing all this information and these stories, because I think this is part of that retelling. And we always like to say it's a redefining, retelling, restating. You know, because you know, the word religion isn't bad. You know, if you put it like we were saying, you know, in this infighting and everything, you know, there's humans involved. There's the chance for imperfection, and no doubtedly it will come up. So
Yeah.
always believe in looking for truth, beauty, and goodness, which is what we're going to talk about in the next segment, and how we can live within these realities and these fruits. On the Divine Within podcast, we share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.